Hello everybody, welcome back to Wolfeei Extras. Today, we're going to be talking about Build Mart again. I've done this before, but I asked for your guys' opinions and what you would want to see me talk about. And one of the comments that immediately popped up when I took a look at the ideas you guys shared to me was about Build Mart. How would you change Build Mart or even flat out replace it with another team-based building game? Now, I will state this just in advance so you don't expect something from me. I do not have a new game idea. If I were to have a new game idea, there's a higher chance that I would keep it for Block Wars than I would give it to MCC. But, you know, so I don't have one, but I'm willing to talk because I've written down all the pros and the cons, in my opinion, that I could have thought of and that I saw on Reddit when I did a little bit of research. I saw all the pros and cons, and I have compiled them, and maybe if any of the Nox who are watching and they're thinking about a way to rework Build Mart, still Build Mart is a little uncertain because it claims to be a building game when the only building aspect is placing blocks correctly, which I guess is the closest that you can get to a building game in a competitive Minecraft event, because real building skill is talent based, and you can't fairly judge creativity in a Minecraft event setting with no bias. So either way, we're going to be talking about this. I've already made a video during Daily December, literally in the middle of it, where I say the problem with MCC's Build Mart. Now, this video, I still somewhat believe in what I say, right? Because, I mean, it's been 3 months. My opinion hasn't shifted that much. I did say in this game that I think Build Mart is really bad. I no longer believe that because I don't want to bandwagon. I just want to have my opinion. I feel like I would not mind playing Build Mart that much. Obviously, it's been a long time since I played it, so maybe my opinion is wrong. I don't think Build Mart is a good game. I also don't think it's terrible. It is probably bottom 3 in the entire event, but regardless, yeah. So in this video, I talk about the issues. There's the wiki that describes what Build Mart is, essentially saying that it's just a team-based game rather than a building game, which is true. I also give suggestions, which I will just ignore for now because I'm gonna say them again probably. So first, let's start with Reddit. Daniel Iltum, 10 days ago in the Discord, or that's in someone's chat actually, sorry. In someone's chat, he said, honestly, Build Mart is currently in a weird spot. We don't have time to revamp it, so we're just going to keep it benched until we get around to it. Now, obviously, at this point in time, we know from the game's announcement that whether it's a joke or not, Build Mart has been announced 4 times for the next event. I feel like there is a decent chance that Build Mart does get played, but also I fully agree that Build Mart is in a weird spot because, like Daniel said, revamping it takes a lot of time. They essentially have to make a new game, or close to a near game, and I mean they just don't have time. I'm pretty sure he said, Daniel says, I want to revamp Build Mart, but we could also make a brand new building game that doesn't have people hating it just because it holds the same name. And I fully agree with that. It is a difficulty, though, because building games are hard to make actually about building. I've seen a lot of people make suggestions. I think I also get to those in the other tabs. Here is another tab from someone that said, just today I watched a video where Philza talked about Build Mart, and what he said was rather interesting. Big part of the frustration with Build Mart is 2 parts. Having to go to a separate area to get resources is 1, and then having to mine said resources with crappy tools is the 2nd. It's a building game where you're chopping down trees again. He suggested that each team have a little store off to the side where they can go get resources out of chests. The way it still has the go get resources and come back aspect with fewer frustration. I feel like the solution would help with memory as well, because it means players would have to remember what they need for significantly less time. This idea is okay, but doesn't solve the issue. It also brings other issues to the table. As much as yes, your gathering aspect of getting resources in Build Mart is shorter, which I think is good. The way you make it shorter is by taking out a lot of interaction when it comes to getting the resources. Obviously, thematically, I feel like it would make more sense and look nicer to keep it the way it is right now, because it looks really grand and large, and it looks pretty interesting for an event setting. It looks, you know, nice and full. Whereas if you go to a shop-like thing, or like a little store, that room would be significantly reduced, because a resource realistically would only require one chest, whereas now it requires a little field. And you can make thematic islands because the amount of surface you're covering actually, you know, if you have several things from the same theme, like flowers, if you're using 6 or 7 flowers and they're all patches of like 12, then yeah, you could make an island about flowers. Whereas in the store, having everything in the same store, first of all, would be hard to locate. You'd have to either know where the things are at, or there would have to be some kind of way to figure it out. Secondly, if you then want to make it every part have their own little section, it would feel very empty, because if you have like a wood section and you only use like 4 wood types in a building game, which I think is a good amount, because too many is probably not that great. There's only like 7 in the game, right? So if you're using a wood section, or you've got a wood section and there's only 7 woods, then you have 7 blocks to get, which is 7 chests. You know how small that would be? Might be a little bit too small for MCC, where everything is probably supposed to be grand and great and supposed to be, you know, feel epic. So yeah, it's an interesting suggestion. I don't think it works out as well as it may seem. I think what they could do is, or at least not what they could do, what they could have done is just put things somewhat closer together, but not necessarily make them super small. I think if you scale things slightly down, make them more easily accessible, and also give people better tools, then obviously the time would already decrease significantly. I think another issue with Build Mart is, I don't know if it's still present, but before, pickup priority was a big issue. What they could do is they could make it so when you break a block, it just appears in your inventory rather than dropping it on the floor. I think that would help a lot. Just a small tweak that would reduce a slight bit of frustration that I at least previously experienced while playing Build Mart. Here's another post, which is on a big post, which is that about like Noxcrew making a mistake with Build Mart, the same they did with Parkour Warrior, which is about how they ignored viewer feedback, which led to other stuff and blah blah blah. Sure, I'm sure there's a lot of value to the post. I'm more interested on this specific comment right now. So this person says, I agree with this. The concept of Build Mart is to remember the blocks in your building and go get them, place them down based on the actual building model you have. To me, this game seems more memory than building. I would love to see a building game in MCC, but I don't think Build Mart is the right one, since it's not much of a building game anyway. I agree, but building games are really hard to make. In what way can you make a building game that doesn't revolve around opinion? Build Battle is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a building game, but that won't fit into MCC, at least with any tweaks. Without any tweaks, I just think it would be pretty difficult to make an actual building game in a competitive environment. I might just be oblivious to an idea, though. I don't know. I fully agree with this. This person below suggests like construction if it was a one-plot team-based build, where it's like probably 3D. There's a lot of flaws with that as well. 3D builds would have to be designed in a way where every block is visible at any time, because you cannot see blocks that are covered by blocks all around, which creates a big restriction on what builds can look like. It's a pretty significant flaw. I know Mineplex Speed Builders is somewhat similar to that idea, and I actually think it's not that bad. I think it's pretty fun. However, I'm pretty sure 3D builds in there that do require you to just kind of guess what block is present in the middle, which is a pretty significant flaw. But yeah, here is the pros and cons list I made to actually prepare for this. I already spent 10 minutes rambling before I even got to my pros and cons. So let's talk about it. Build Mart. Pros, it's the only building game in MCC, making it feel different. By the way, that's from viewers. It's not even a building game. It's only themed to be like a building game. but it's not really a building game. Yes, you build in the game, but so do you to get to the side. So would that also be partially a building game because some of the maps require you to place down blocks? I don't think so. So that's my take on that. It heavily relies on teamwork and communication to do well in. I agree, and I think that's a really good aspect. It's by the way, making it feel different, I do think it's a unique game in MCC. I do think it fills a gap that is needed in MCC, so that is good. Good Build Mart strategies are fun to watch. For example, Green. I think that's true too. I haven't really watched Green much, if at all, in MCC. Especially not for Build Mart, because I don't really seek out to watch Build Mart. But I have heard a lot of good things about Green's POVs and how they're really entertaining, so I can believe that. I also added a point that I didn't really see mentioned. Good resource management is rewarded. If you are very aware of what you've got, you can very efficiently allocate your players to get certain things before you actually need them. I think it's a really nice element of gameplay that obviously is not present in any game because the gameplay is significantly different from other games. Cons, a lot of players dislike it. That's something that the viewer said. I struggled to find the exact reason why, aside from that Filza thing that I just showed. It's the fact that it's so disliked, but the issues that are presented with it are not that big, in my opinion, is a little odd. However, I'm not going to argue with people's opinion, because if they don't like it, they don't like it. That's as simple as it can be. It can be boring to watch, especially for streamers doing bad. That is true, but that also applies to a lot of games. Survival games would be super boring to watch if your streamer just dies immediately, is an example. Grid Runners is terrible to watch, unless your team that you're watching is really funny. But otherwise, if they're trying and they're struggling and not succeeding at doing the puzzle for Grid Runners, that is not fun to watch. So it applies to other games, but I can completely understand that in Build Mart, it is definitely something that is negatively affecting it. It can be overwhelming for viewers and maybe players as well. I saw this on a post talking about like people who are neurodivergent and have ADHD. I am not too knowledgeable about that topic. I'm also not going to self-diagnose myself, but I might have it. Who knows? I can see it. There's a lot of info. There's 3 builds that or 3 tasks basically that a team all has to do with no real guide on what to start with. They kind of have to figure it out themselves. Then they're thrown into a pool or thrown into the Mart aspect, which is just a big like fan with a bunch of floating islands. You're gonna have to figure out where everything is. It's a little bit all over the place. So I can see that. I can agree with that to some extent. I actually think the old Build Mart format, when it comes to how things were laid out, was nicer. I do understand why they changed it, because certain blocks just being further away is a little weird. However, I think it was more manageable when it came to like knowing where things are. Just because you could be like, oh, the wood's on the close right side, stones in the middle left. Like, that's way easier than being like, all right, so when you go in, turn 180 degrees and look slightly to the left, that island. Like, it's a little easier to spot where things are. But I also think the transportation system with just ice boating, basically, did not really work out too well, especially when it comes to collision. It was a little silly. I would be, actually, I hope they bring that back for MCC Scuffed. I think it'd be really funny. But yeah, that's my take on that. Some players who struggle with short-term memory have an immediate disadvantage over something they can't control due to the memorization aspect of Build Mart. This is true. This was also in the same post about ADHD and etc. Like I said, cannot really speak on this too far because I am not too knowledgeable about this. However, I do recognize similar things that people have mentioned are related to short-term memory and stuff like that. I know kind of what it's like, but obviously cannot speak fully for that. That is probably very true, that is an issue. I know Techno at some point had like a strategy where he wrote everything down, and it seemed to work really well. Then they found a way to not make that viable anymore, and those strategies. Oh, sorry. Those strategies became a lot less useful. Another part is custom textures make existing block knowledge less useful. It becomes really difficult to recognize some blocks in Build Mart. I think for the most part they are relatively similar to the vanilla textures, but it's still not like immediately recognizable, which it just isn't a fun aspect of gameplay to just have to look around everywhere the entire time. Then two things that I wrote down as well that I couldn't find while doing the research is the pace of the game feels too slow. I think I mentioned this in this video as well, where Build Mart compared to other games, when you think about momentum and pacing and how things are relatively quick, all the team-based games are pretty slow. Grid Runners can be fast, but sometimes is pretty slow. For Grid Runners, I feel like it's a bit weird as well, where I also am not too big of a fan when it comes to viewing experience, because watching people do puzzles is really frustrating, because as a viewer, you just always, because you're like you're watching, it's going to be easier to figure out what the puzzle is, because when you're put on the spot, it's just less easy to have an oversight. Grid Runners, my issue with that is the momentum kind of stops after every single level. It's really hard to just keep it going, because there's always going to be a room that kind of just puts your team, like forces your team to just stop, sit, and think, which I guess is good, but it feels a bit weird. In Build Mart, that is kind of constantly the issue, because there isn't any moment in Build Mart where I think you really have good momentum. This is also kind of the case in SOT, which may also be a reason why SOT is often said to not be that fun to watch, just because the pace is really slow, especially compared to other games. Like, obviously, I mean, BattleBox, it's PvP quick-paced. Sky Battle, it's relatively quick-paced. SG is kind of in the middle. It starts pretty slow-paced, and then it like starts building up in speed. Hole in the Wall is super fast-paced because you have like action going on every few seconds. Parkour Tag is high pacing. Parkour Warrior is in the middle-ish, can also be pretty high pacing. Regardless, you get my point, right? Build Mart is a slow pace, and I feel like it just leaves a lot of room with nothing, basically. There's just a lot of nothing going on, a big nothing burger. Also, I said you spend more time getting blocks than you get to place them down, which I also agree with. The majority of the time you spend in Build Mart, from my perspective and from my memory, is floating in the little mart room and breaking the blocks and getting them back to your base. You don't spend as much time actually building. Sometimes you figure out what you need to build, but then more often than not, you probably have to go back to get more resources because you ran out, or you have to tell someone else to get more resources, in which they will go back to just mining. It's just like, it doesn't feel right. I understand that it's supposed to be a big element of gameplay. It just doesn't feel right to me. I don't know if other people will agree with that. So, I don't know. And then also, I already said this, a lot of people said, well, they should make a building game. MCC shouldn't keep a building game. There needs to be a building game. Build Mart's barely a building game. It's more teamwork and memorization, communication, etc. Building is just a small aspect of gameplay. The issue with a building game is it requires creativity, which can't be fairly judged in an unbiased competitive event setting, which is true. Because unless they train AI to judge, like, creativity, which honestly would be kind of funny if they could figure that out somehow in Minecraft, then, yeah, it's just not going to be something they can do. You can't have the staff vote on it, because in some way, shape, or form, there will always be either bias or someone will think it's bias, so it will always go wrong. Also, if the Nox room make a decision, there's only room for complaints and not much room for praise and thankfulness. If the viewers do it, whoever has the most viewers is just going to win, which is not fair. So it's kind of just like in a position where they can't really do much. And that's kind of it. I'm not gonna go out here and say that I am the smart guy who knows how to fix Build Mart, because I'm not. I'm not gonna say I'm the smart guy who knows what the problem with Build Mart is, because I'm not. I've pointed out things that I think are good. I've pointed out things that are bad. I think if the Nox crew managed to make a new game that features the majority of the good aspects of Build Mart and the minority of the bad aspects of Build Mart, and still make it feel like a quote-unquote building game, whether that's like actually by building a lot or not, is up to them. They can figure it out. I'm not going to tell the Nox crew what to do, because clearly I don't actually know. I think MCC needs a game like Build Mart. It doesn't need Build Mart, because clearly a lot of people are not big fans of it. It sucks that one of the unique games of MCC, meaning not one of the PvP or parkour ones, is one of the ones that people don't like as much. Unfortunately, Grid Runners seems to also be somewhat in that boat, where a lot of people, or at least I've seen a good amount of people not like Grid Runners from a viewer experience, which sucks, because at that point you're just leaning into a full like PvP parkour event, and it just the variety is just gone. You're just only going to reward like your sapnaps, your purples, etc., and all the like Hermitcraft players are just going to not be rewarded as much. So it's just not fair. That's my take on Build Mart. Let me know what you think, and I will see you all later. Goodbye.